The world's most honored watch is Longines. Longines watches have won 10 World's Fair grand prizes, 28 gold medals, and more honors for accuracy than any other timepiece. Longines, the world's most honored watch, is made and guaranteed by the Longines Whitnall Watch Company.
It's time for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of the important issues of the hour, brought to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. A presentation of the Longines Whitnall Watch Company, maker of Longines, the world's most honored watch, and Whitnall, distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines. Good evening. This is Frank Knight. May I introduce our co-editors for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope? Mr. Henry Hazlitt, editor of the Freeman and contributing editor of Newsweek magazine, and Mr. William F. Buckley, associate editor of the American Mercury and author of God and Man at Yale. Our distinguished guest for this evening is His Excellency John Lodge, Governor of Connecticut. The opinions expressed are necessarily those of the speakers.
Governor Lodge, you've been almost as active as your brother, the senator from Massachusetts, in promoting the campaign for General Eisenhower for president. So I'd like to begin to by asking you as my first question, what are your reasons for supporting General Eisenhower?
Well, Mr. Hazlitt, I think that General Eisenhower is preeminently well fitted to assume the responsibilities of the presidency at this difficult and dangerous time. I think both by his character, by his tested experience, by his training, he is admirably suited to be President of the United States. And I think that he has dealt with such vast affairs that dealing with the vast affairs of the presidency will present less of a problem to him than to any other candidate that I can think of.
Well, would you expect that the Republican convention would nominate General Eisenhower without knowing what his position was on some of the crucial issues that confront us?
Well, the general has expressed his opinion on many of the crucial questions which confront us, and of course he is better versed in the most important question of all, and that is the question of war and peace, than probably any other man, or at least as well versed as any other man.
Well, even on foreign policy, are his ideas explicitly known? For example, are his reactions to the Korean War explicitly known as to what he would do in the present situation, for example?
No, they are not. His specific views on a number of foreign affairs matters are not known. That is true. But I confidently believe that once he has been nominated by the Republican convention, that he will make his detailed views known. In the meantime, we know what his capacity as a man is, and I think that it is not always necessary for the man to seek the office. I think there are cases when the office should seek the man. I think the presidency is an office which should be neither sought nor declined, perhaps, although I don't say that it isn't right to seek it, but I don't think it's necessary to seek it.
Well, do you think that the convention will want to know more explicitly before it nominates him what his views are, or do you think they'll have to wait until after they've nominated him?
Well, there are some delegates, Mr. Hazlitt, who have committed themselves to some of the other candidates without being too interested in their views, I suggest.
Well, Senator Taft's views are very well known, aren't they, on practically every major issue?
But you don't suggest that all the delegates committed to Senator Taft are committed to him because of his views.
Well, I don't know about that, but I was wondering whether you thought it was a fair thing, for example, that in a primary contest that Senator Taft, whose views are known on practically all domestic issues and on foreign issues, should be, in effect, running against a general who hasn't stated those views, so that people don't know whether they would be alienated if they heard those views or not.
Well, he has expressed his views on a good many matters. Of course, we don't have nothing but the delegates are not picked exclusively in primaries. They are picked also at conventions.
Governor, you mentioned that the issue between war and peace is the most important one that confronts us today.
Yes.
Now, in light of that, would you say that the present administration had unwisely conducted itself vis-a-vis this issue?
With regard to the whole question of
That's
war and
foreign
peace,
policy.
taking it as a general matter, I think that it has been a record of abysmal failure.
In view of that, do you think that perhaps General Eisenhower has made a mistake, as he has in the eyes of some people, in being a part of this foreign policy?
Well, in the first place, I would like to say that some of the moves of the present administration in Europe I have agreed with. I'm for the Marshall Plan. I was for the Greek-Turkey Bill. I'm for NATO. I'm for the Mutual Defense Assistance Act, and for a number of other measures. Although I think that some of them came late.
But taking the whole picture...
Now, the general has a right to... the general has a responsibility to obey orders, and he has not got a responsibility to express himself as publicly as disagreeing with the orders that he receives, but he doesn't necessarily have to agree with his orders any more than General MacArthur had to agree with all the orders that he received.
That's right, Governor, but some people think that Eisenhower should have withdrawn from the position of a man who had to answer to his commander-in-chief a year or two ago and stepped back into the American scene and tried to take foreign policy on the whole, and in that way perhaps have tried to avert the tragedy in China. Would you have backed such a move had General Eisenhower made it a couple of years ago?
Well, that's a very difficult decision. It's very hard for anyone to make someone else's decision for them. General Eisenhower is a man of very high character. And it was apparently his belief that he could serve his country best by accepting the command of NATO. Certainly, it is a most important position.
Well, Governor, some of the papers have been publishing stories saying that the supporters of Eisenhower, or some of the managers for General Eisenhower, have changed their mind completely regarding whether he should come back now or not. That earlier they had been urging him to return, but after the results at New Hampshire and Minnesota, they're now trying to put pressure the other way, that he not come back until, let's say, at least the whole primaries are over, the chief primary being at Oregon. Until that is over, he shouldn't return. I was wondering whether you know anything about the attitude of these managers and what your own opinion is.
I don't know anything more than that, but I would say that the general had done quite well in absentia.
So you think it would be a good idea for him to stay where he is until
well,
May 16th?
I'm not operating on that level. I'm working mostly in Connecticut. I make a few speeches outside, but of course I'm not handling the general's campaign.
When will the delegates be picked in Connecticut to the convention?
Well, the delegates to our state convention will be picked at caucuses on April 28th, and the delegates to the national convention will be picked at our state convention on May 26th and May 27th.
And will you expect to head that convention, those delegates?
I'm told that that's a definite possibility. But it's also possible that I might be a delegate.
Governor, I've heard that a lot of people are ready to support General Eisenhower just as soon as they learn what his views are on Korea. Korea, that is, in terms of the MacArthur crisis and disagreement. Do you feel free to speak for General Eisenhower in the sense of telling us what stand he will take when he comes back to the United States about the MacArthur firing?
No, I wouldn't presume to speak for the general on that.
Have you any ideas what he would say?
I wouldn't be sure that he would comment on the firing of General MacArthur. I don't know whether he would feel that that was a useful thing to do at this point.
Well, useful in the sense that a lot of voters want him to commit himself. Wouldn't you say, or would you?
Well, I haven't heard that before. If you tell me that the voters want him to commit himself on that, I wouldn't say you were wrong, but I haven't happened to have heard that.
I see.
Well, do you think General Eisenhower will favor the Aid to Europe program indefinitely, or do you think he'll want a definite termination to it?
Well, I imagine that they're operating on something of a schedule. Of course, their schedule has been very much delayed by the fact that although the Congress passed the funds have not been expended in nearly as large amounts as they should have been, and a large block of the funds hasn't even been committed. So that has retarded the program.
So you don't think that the general would necessarily favor the full $7,900,000,000 appropriation now being advocated?
Well, I have no means of knowing that, and
Yes.
of course that directly involves his command. But speaking for myself, and I'm not on the Foreign Affairs Committee anymore, I would say that until the money which has already been appropriated has at least been committed, it would seem somewhat futile to appropriate the full amount.
Yes. Well, you think that voters at primaries, when they're choosing, let us say, between Senator Taft and General Eisenhower, will be choosing between what is called isolationism and what is called internationalism? And do you think, moreover, that whether they are or not, it will be interpreted that that is their choice?
I suppose some people might interpret it that way. Those are labels which can sometimes be rather misleading.
And you don't think that is the decision they will be making?
Well, I think there are so many other things involved in the decision beyond that I would hesitate to say that was the only decision involved.
Governor, as a prominent supporter of the general, have you personally any curiosity as to what the general's attitude will be about Korea and the MacArthur filing?
Yes, I have a great personal curiosity.
So you personally would urge him to commit himself sometime in the near future?
Well, I don't say that I would, but my support of the general is based on my sense of what this country needs at this point. It's also based on the fact that I believe that the general can fire the imagination and kindle the spirit of the people of this country.
Well,
but in terms of war and peace, the issue of war and peace, Korea looms very large in our reckoning, right, of what we have got to do to kindle the spirit of the people.
Yes, I think Korea is a very important thing, and I have no doubt that he'll express some views on the question of Korea.
And as a final question, Senator, I'd like to ask Senator a final question, whether he would
I'm the governor,
think what would the chief qualification that he thinks that General Eisenhower would bring to the presidency?
Well, as I say, he has dealt with vast affairs. He has had great executive experience. I am not proposing the general for a seat in the United States Senate. I'm proposing him for the presidency. Now, I don't say that a senator cannot make a good president, but I hope we won't come to the point where you have to be a senator in order to become president.
Well, thank you very much, Governor, for the able presentation you've made tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hazlitt, Mr. Buckley.
The editorial board for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope was Mr. Henry Hazlitt and Mr. William F. Buckley. Our distinguished guest was His Excellency John Lodge, Governor of Connecticut.